What up, Unstoppable? So I am about to roll into my second interview on this road trip to Charleston. We're going to be talking to Karalee Fallert. So Karalee Fallert was referred to me by Randy Weinstein, and Randy, I'm pretty sure Randy and Karalee got close during the Charleston Wine and Food Festival. Also, I know that Karalee is very active in Randy's FAB program to help connect women in hospitality. This woman, Karalee Fallert, holy moly, diving in this morning in preparation for today's conversation. She's a hustler. She got to Charleston in 2000. In 2005, she was opening her first restaurants after just serving and working in the industry, probably networking and all that sort of thing. Just looking at her track record, and it's impossible for me to remember all this. I'm looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 concepts since 2005. One of those concepts, Taco Boy, I think it was one of our earliest concepts, has 5 locations. We have a lot to unpackage today. On top of all of this, she is behind a program that helps kids understand the importance of gardening and food and just growing their own food, the joy in that, the nutritional value in that. The food that they produce goes to local schools, and they also sell it at an affordable price to the citizens here in Charleston community. And on top of that, she started a school, a Montessori school. So I don't know how she's doing all this. It's pretty impressive. We're about to roll in, and I gotta pull back the layers. I don't even know where to start, but Karalee, I gotta say, you're impressive, and I cannot wait to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce to you today's guest, founder, partner, and CEO of All Good Industries, Karalee Nielsen Fallert. Karalee, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm here.
Yes, I cannot wait to dive into your story. Just totally blown away by all the things you got going on between opening all these restaurants, being involved in your community, and not just your community, but the greater restaurant industry community. You just got so much going on. I can't wait to pull back the layers to kind of dive into what's going on in your head. But let's get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quote or mantra. What do you got for us?
Yeah, I love Growth is the Only Evidence of Life by John Henry Newman.
Growth is the only evidence of life. Dive into that.
Yeah, I was, I think from a very young age, impressed by both of my folks that we should just constantly be trying to improve who we are and how we live our lives and how we interact with other people. And I think that, life is full of beautiful and messy and amazing things. But if we just keep pursuing our own growth and the growth of others and the growth of our interconnectedness and our community for us, that our potential is limitless.
I love this. And honestly, in my studies of just following my curiosity, and I also really geek out over alien stuff. I don't know about you.
Man,
but
I like it.
Yeah. But when you start looking into that stuff, you start looking into Eastern culture, what their beliefs are and how those two worlds are starting to collide, and this idea of mindfulness and what is life. You start asking that question, what is life? You start to see just patterns in business and life and theory emerge. And I think that you're absolutely right. Life, and this is one of the things, I think life is literally just, if you look at life, we all came from the same single cell organism. Mm-hmm. We all got on this planet the same way. Somehow, we don't know exactly, but we evolved from that single cell organism. I don't know if you're religious or not, if you're shaking your head to this, but it's just life grows, it evolves, it changes, it adapts. And we're doing it constantly as humans, and we pay it forward to the next generation, and civilizations evolve. It's constant, never-ending growth, and I think it is that simple.
Yeah, and we always talk about it as our team. This might sound a little morbid or a little black and white, but we always just say, if you're not growing, you're dying, right? And not even just as individuals, as an organization.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the status quo is lethal, right? We do it just because it's the way we've always done it.
That's the restaurant industry did for like 100 years. The status
Right.
quo.
Right. Or, and there is some sense of like, yeah, the people come in because they love the same taco or they love the same shrimp salad somewhere and they want that memory. But the other side of that is that we always have to be relevant, even in institutional, in our institutional heritage of, what we're doing. And so it has so many meanings, right? It's as an organization, are we constantly growing? Are we pushing ourselves to improve what we do? Are we finding ways to make the experience, the cultural experience of our teams better? I think we basically hand over the keys and say we're done when we say we've made it.
Yeah.
Right.
So where does the growth start for you? Take me back to the beginning. Is that 2000? Is that before 2000? I know you got Charleston in 2000.
Yeah, my career, it's funny. My career started probably when I was 8 years old, I feel like. Like I grew up in a household with entrepreneur parents who my mom made dinner for the five of us to eat after she ran a construction company every day, and we sat down and we shared what is my passion about the industry is we shared connection every single day over food that was prepared with love and with the intention of connection. And I didn't know it then, but I'll never forget, like the first time my older siblings came home and I was kind of the person in charge, albeit like probably way too young. I had decided that I was going to make hors d'oeuvres for them when they got home from band practice. And like I went to the drawer in the refrigerator and like used all the deli meat for the week. I got all the crackers out. I mean, I had no business doing that, but I have this very clear memory of like flooding the counters with sheet trays of like my version of appetizers and the look of kind of sheer terror on their face when they walked in the door of like, what happened here, But I remember that moment of anticipation and wanting to provide and surprise and delight, and nourish.
Why did you want to do these things, though? What was driving you, do you think, getting into that childhood mind of yours?
Yeah, I have always loved the element of surprise. And I think, there were times I got in trouble for the bad surprises, the practical joke surprises.
Gone wrong.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But and just wanting to nourish and take care of people. Yeah. I think that's just innate.
What happens when you do that? Like, what are you receiving when that happens?
Man, I find my purpose,
I have this working theory. Do people ever? I think it's the recognition. It's being seen and valued. Do you think it's a swing and a miss? There's something about being seen and appreciated for something that you've done that it just feels good to be.
Yeah, I've never felt that. In fact, I don't. I kind of always shied away from the recognition, and I think it's actually just the feeling of watching somebody else have that moment of joy,
that feels
and
good.
Knowing that you helped participate in that, and it's kind of what I say to our teams every day. Like we have this privilege, this distinct privilege in what we do to spark joy and nourish others.
Yeah. It's instant gratification that you have an impact.
Totally.
And I think that's just part of what it means to be a human is to know that like I'm being seen, I'm being valued. Like and maybe that's not why but like at the same time, seeing the someone's reaction to it is gratification.
Totally. And I think it's almost the mirror of that, watching somebody else be seen and valued in the way that they're feeling that experience that they get. Right. That to me is probably greater, is like that person feels special. Not sure why. They don't see all the inner workings of the magic behind restaurants, but yet they leave with this experience of feeling better than when they did.
Yeah. So let's get in our jet now. This is an analogy I like to use. We zoom up to 30,000 feet.
Yep.
Let's cruise to how you got to the year 2000, and maybe we can dissect some of it. But just give me the picture.
Well, I actually started before that. I think my first restaurant I opened in 1996. I was 19 years old. Damn. And I left culinary school to pursue an opportunity. I was working for Robert Redford Sundance in Utah, and I was in culinary school, and I met my first business partner who, we shared the same passion for world wraps. And I got a phone call one morning, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to start a restaurant together? You do all the work, and I'll put the money in." And I'll never forget thinking like, I just got to call my parents and tell them I'm leaving school. you know,
I mean, that's what you're going to school for.
Right,
you know?
right. And so my parents were both supportive. Luckily, they're both, you know, entrepreneurs and not so risk averse that they didn't realize I couldn't go back to school.
Yeah, and I feel like the restaurant industry is one of the unique industries where it's really the school of hard knocks.
Oh, yeah.
You don't learn until you start getting in.
No,
there.
not
And
at all.
You don't want that debt to get started either. You know, so
No. And so I did that in Utah for about 18 months and then ended up working, you know, selling to that partner and working for PF Chang's for a brief period and learning a little bit about like standardization. And they were kind of at the height of their expansion. And I remember, you know, some of the greats, the you know, the folks that were there at the time really set a very high bar for me of how you train people and how you make them feel like they belong in an organization. And they were just amazing at that time. And so I was really glad that I got to see that, because it wasn't long after that I decided I wanted to get back to the coast. And I grew up in California, and at the time my family was, or my friends who were graduating from college or law school, or they just were like, do not move back here, it's so expensive. You know, like we're all like hot bunking in, we're, you know, whatever it was just, I could sense that there was more stress there. And so a friend of mine said, hey, check out the Southeast coast. And I drove down the coast right after Hurricane Floyd, and in North Carolina where there are like hog farms that had flooded, and they were like carcasses still on the side of the road. I was like, what is going on in this place, you know?
yeah, this is your first impression.
Yeah, it was so bonkers. And then driving into Charleston across the old bridge the next day and having this this feeling that I was supposed to be here. And I remember looking at my friend and saying, I don't know if you feel the same way, but this is where I'm supposed to be.
I would imagine the cost of living in Charleston in 2000 was probably pretty reasonable.
It was.
Compared to California.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and to be able to live at the beach and, you know, was a big thing for me. And so after moving here 6 months later, I started, I was living on Folly Beach, which at the time we kind of joke about, like, it was a place where you could hide if you really wanted to, like people who had never left the island, like not crossed the river for 10 years, you know,
That's
and
wild.
lived a very, like, you know, vagabond life. And it was a really lovely place, you know, warm water. I'd never had like beach culture the way that Eastern beach culture is and Southeastern beach culture.
How's it different? Not that we're here to
Well,
talk about beach culture, but I'm
No,
curious.
I think it's relevant because I think it had an impact on why I started Taco Boy. But, you know, growing up in California, my dad's family's from Orange County. And so we had the opportunity to be able to go to the beach and see and spend a lot of time there. So it's like, it's rocky, it's, you know, it's cold water, it's big waves, it's California beach culture, which has a lot of impact from the border, from, you know, influences of Mexican immigrants and Mexican culture and obviously like the melting pot that, and, you know, I'm not even sure that's the relevant word anymore, but
Asian
like
culture too.
yeah, everything, you know. And so, but my experiences of like the beach culture in California was really influential on me. And then when I came out here, and you don't have the big rocky cliffs into the ocean, and it's, you know, it's a very different beach. And I remember looking at the marsh and being like, what is this ugly stuff? You know,
Why does it smell?
where's the beautiful tide pools? And
Who farted?
yeah. It was just this weird thing, you know. And then I grew to really love and appreciate it. And then also just realized how different they were, and that the beach culture life that I was used to, where the beach and the ocean and the seafood component were married, right? Like right on the beach, whether it was taco trucks or stands or whatever it was, fish tacos. It didn't exist here. And I kept wondering why we'd go surfing and come out of the water and be like, where's the fish tacos?
Yeah.
You know? And so it wasn't, you could eat seafood in downtown restaurants, and there were definitely fry shacks in different places, but it wasn't seafood and beach culture put together.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a significant impact for me to eventually,
I
you
bet
know.
that has a lot to do with Hispanic and Asian culture, because I feel like they are very like street food. Like it's very common. Like if there's a street, there's food.
Yeah.
You know, and like the East Coast is more rigid when it comes to that sort of things. More like, I don't want to say like proper. Not that it is more proper, but they think that it's more proper. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, there's definitely like food vendor, like hawker culture, like, you know, is more, I think you see it more in like the big cities and, you know, and where there is more diversity, frankly. And here we didn't have it.
Yeah.
You know?
I do want to pull back some layers.
Yeah.
1990, was it 1999 or 1996 that you opened your first restaurant?
1996.
1996.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet there's this. Can you pull lessons? Usually, it's the first lesson that the first restaurant. Usually, you're like, what was that? Especially after opening like almost 20 restaurants thereafter.
Yeah.
Like through the filter you have now, reflecting back at that person, what were your struggles? What were your challenges?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was just like I was 19 years old, and I just used the knowledge that I had and asked everybody that I could, to participate and help point in the next direction of the next professional who could give me some advice. But, I just did it. And I think that's a common thing that keeps happening is like, I just don't see the reason why we shouldn't try.
Yeah.
Every single time. But the reality of it is it was not very successful, because we made a lot of mistakes. And even though I knew things like food costs, things, the most important thing about our business is people and leading people and crafting teams and the people who come in the door to pay bills. Like I had no idea at that point that was the most important thing. So I made every mistake there was.
Get specific. What were
like,
the mistakes?
like not knowing how to properly recruit and hire people. And so I was like, all my friends worked there. And that became difficult faster. Or how
Why does it become difficult when you hire nothing but friends?
Oh, well, managing them and setting expectations and holding everybody accountable sure becomes very difficult.
You don't want to upset your friend.
Yeah, totally. And you can create a toxic work environment pretty quickly when people aren't treated fairly and consistently.
Yeah.
And I think there was at the time, I led with a more emotional outlook. And the restaurant business is can be chaotic, and it's around the clock, and you can be tired even at 19 years old, And
So if you have friends, I'm reading between the lines.
Yeah.
You're saying, are you more likely to not treat everybody the same? Are you going to show favoritism towards a friend?
Yeah, I think it is natural to want the people that you love to succeed and to feel good about what they're doing, right? And so sometimes it's harder. It might be hard. What I didn't know then, what I know now, is that clear is kind, right?
Candor.
And candor. And that is like the highest value of love and appreciation for somebody to be clear with them. But I didn't know that in my immaturity, and so leading with the like not wanting to upset anyone and not realizing how passively aggressive that was.
Yeah. I still struggle with this because technically, I mean, I've interviewed almost thousands of restaurant owners, but I'm still kind of a young entrepreneur, So I was a solopreneur for the most of it. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm actually starting to surround myself with a team. Oh yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, I've learned this. I know this, but like we're still human at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You don't see it until you're in it. You have to take a few steps back. You're like, I'm doing all the things I've learned not to do. To get emotional, not wanting to tell somebody what you're really thinking because you don't want, because integrity is important to you.
Right.
Like maybe you have to take something back because I don't know. It gets sloppy. It's easier said than done.
Yeah. But I think it's also like the more practice, right? And I think so to the big lesson that I learned was ultimately it was just the first time I tried. Yeah. And so inevitably there were going to be major mistakes and major pitfalls and, everything from like, not allocating the kitchen versus the service area properly and having way too much space, and just the things I'd been in culinary school, but I hadn't actually worked in kitchens. I'd worked on the service side and the hospitality side. And so, it was like set up, not properly and was more difficult to run from the people who were running it. So, I mean, I look back and it's like, whew.
Yeah. You're bringing up, so I love this conversation because I recently had the author of The Practicing Mind 3 different books, The Practicing Mind, Fully Engaged, and It's Just a Thought. Mm-hmm. And his name is Thomas Sterner. Yeah. And the book is about mindfulness, the practicing mind. Mm-hmm. And what you just said, is practice. And I think early in our career, we can get super down on ourselves because we look at what we're doing and then we look at the people that we admire and we're like, we're nowhere near that. Yeah. Or we're like, you're just like, you feel like you're just trapped in chaos, right? Where you are right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And because like what happens is you get this fear and this anxiety that you're doing things wrong, but that like that's part of the journey. That's part of the practice. Yeah. When you start golfing, you suck. Yeah. But the only way you get better is by keep swing. And eventually you're going to be hitting it down 300 yards, center fairway. I don't know. I'm not a golfer, but I think 300 yards is normal, right? I don't ask.
Shrugging my shoulders.
So like what's going through your mind as I'm saying this?
Yeah, that at every level of every year, of every decade, of every restaurant, of every team member, that I'm always learning.
Yeah.
That it never, I think the idea, and to piggyback on what you're saying, I think that we probably have a similar studies or outlook on life, but it, even like this morning, like I was telling you, like 911 phone calls going off, and really, problematic things that you have to deal with, and things that can be extraordinarily scary. Like
that happened this morning.
Yeah.
You're
And
so
this
cool, calm, and collected right now.
and no matter what level you get to, you haven't seen it all, right? And as I train other senior leaders in our team, as we're growing our team right now to do this expansion of Taco Boy in the Southeast, we kind of sometimes like to joke and like regale each other with like, well, you want to know what happened in 2022, or whatever it was. But the reality of it is even my mentor, Jerry Shearer, who's been in the business for 40 years, usually he has seen things, and we work through it together. He's my business partner too, but he's still surprised by things. And that just tells you, like, you're always learning. You're never not going to learn as long as you keep it open, right? With this idea that you'll never know it all.
Yeah, and the world's, like we said, like if you're not growing, you're dying, because the world is changing around us. Even if you've learned everything, which is not possible, give it a day. It will change. Yeah.
And I think it's helped me take the turbulence out of, being so emotionally attached or having my ego on the forefront. And that was something that I learned really early on too, right? Yeah. And especially when I was 19 or 27, and when I had to open a Spanish wine bar in Charleston, and I was 27 years old, and I was like it was amazing, and I had these other restaurants, and to be that young and carefree and yet successful and learning and growing was like, it took a few years and a few difficult things to realize, like, wait a minute, this is a lot harder than it should be because of how centered my ego is on this, versus just realizing like I'm a conduit for this learning and this progress. And if I'm willing to put my hands out and grab other people in the process, then we're a greater conduit and a greater, human organization to help everybody be a part of that. Yeah. And the interconnectedness. And so it just, I think there was a time to just realize I am the engine, but it's not about me.
Yes. I'm loving this. I really am. And I'm tempted to go deeper, but I want to make sure we talk about what's going on in current times. Yeah. I do want to give a nod to P.F. Chang's. Where were they in 1999 or 1998, whenever you were working there?
Yeah, I want to say just less than 20 stores.
20 stores. So still a small company-ish.
Yeah.
Relative to what they are today. I don't know if we need to go into this deep, but just what you did, I think, is so great. I just want to acknowledge, go work for a corporation. Go start a franchise. Yeah. If you have zero restaurant experience and you have money, this isn't for everybody. You need to have money to start a franchise. But you want to dive into the restaurant industry, go be a part of an amazing franchise and learn the ropes, because they're going to give you all the systems and processes you need. Yeah. And then once you feel like you got that going, then you can do what your thing is. There's nothing saying that if you're a franchise owner, you can't also open your own concepts. Right. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But I just think that to go into those organized organizations, to learn the standards, training, and this culture stuff is so important. Do you want to reflect a little bit more on that?
No, for sure. And I think they probably don't get enough credit, right? Like in the world of, depending on what spectrum of the industry you're in, but like the bespoke, independent, highly creative, Michelin star seeking businesses, I don't think always give a lot of credit to those larger organizations, whether they're, franchise or big corporately owned restaurant chains. But the reason why there are so many is because they've understood the paramount, the absolute critical thing about consistency in restaurants, and so they have dialed it down. They have standardized everything. They understand how to do that, and they understand how to try to train people for consistency. And so once you see that, then I think you can understand how to really create an institution and a wonderful experience for your guests and potentially a successful business.
Yeah. Systems, processes, culture, consistency, that helps you create impact. When you have thousands of locations, that impact gets spread out because there's more people. So, but if you can take that level of system, processes, procedures, culture, and consistency and narrow the focus into 10 locations, the impact I don't know if you know like physics or anything, but the impact you can do when you narrow the focus, right, is huge. So take those lessons, narrow the focus into your small business, and watch the impact.
Yeah.
It's powerful. Okay, so now is a great time to take our first break to thank our sponsors. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about you land in Charleston and what happens thereafter. We are back, and the year is 2000. You land in Charleston.
Yeah.
What's the game plan?
Well, I didn't really think I wanted to be in restaurants anymore. And I thought I wanted to be a writer.
Scared straight, huh?
I just think that, like, maybe I should go to school. Maybe I should do this. You know, I was still pretty, like, just 20. I think I was 22 at the time or something like that. And 22 or 23. And I thought, I really wanted to be a writer. I was living on Folly Beach. And I remember taking a tour of a clam farm that was out there, thinking, like, maybe I'll write something about this and submit it or figure out what I want to do. And a friend of mine at the time, I wanted to fly back to Salt Lake City for Christmas. My family was there, and I needed money for the holidays. And they were like, hey, I saw this restaurant, McCrady's downtown, is hiring, and like, you should just go host there or something and earn money for the holidays, right? So I did that. And I was in orientation and training with the admin team when the office manager saw my resume and was like, hey, mate, you've already owned your own restaurant. Like, what are you doing just trying to host? And I just told her, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to be in the business anymore. And I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out. And she said, well, I'm helping the ownership of this restaurant open a French brasserie in Charleston, here in town. Do you want to help? And I was like, yep, sure. And so I had the opportunity to work and open a restaurant called 39 Rue de Jean, and started as kind of the, lead admin and helping be on site really to help get the business open with that team. And eventually was the director of operations.
What was your biggest points of evolution during this time?
I think really seeing the inflection point of like the difference between that it's a party, you throw a party every day, and that everybody on the team plays a different role in that. And usually the person who is also the best at throwing the party is also not the best person at making sure the bills get paid, right? That we all have these strengths. And
that's me.
Yeah. And so I think that was the first time that I saw this idea that great restaurateurs and entrepreneurs in general, understand their strengths and surround themselves with people who complement their weaknesses or cover their weaknesses, and I couldn't probably have articulated at that time, but I really watched both that business and then the sister businesses that we built out of that for that group. I really watched just how you put together a team and what happens when you put people on the wrong seat on the bus.
Yeah.
And how you have
Jim
to
Collins there.
Oh yeah, of course. And just what, I like I said, I couldn't have articulated it at the time, but looking back, that's exactly what I was learning ultimately, and really how a lot of restaurants fail because people will get into it for that romantic notion of throwing a party every night, or they love, their family loves to cook or whatever it is. And they forget it's a business and they don't treat it like a business.
When you're pouring a glass of wine at home for a friend, you don't have to make sure it gets rung up.
Yeah.
These little things that will trip you up,
Yeah.
And that is why you love this industry. And all that other stuff sounds frightening. Then maybe go figure out how to make money so you can throw parties every night. Because it's not going to be what you think it is. And honestly, and I don't mean to sound negative, I think half my mission with this podcast is to talk people out of opening restaurants. Seriously, because you're saving yourself a huge headache if you think it's going to be a party every night.
Yeah. No, there's been, I've helped way too many people with the restaurants who started with those, romantic notions, but so it was a good opportunity for me to work and see and be a part of just building restaurants from the ground up with them. And at the time I had met a future business partner who was really instrumental in connecting me with one of my primary current partners who I talked about, Jerry Shearer, who's been amazing. And, but I was able to be on the ground floor as a partner with Post Tavern at the time. And that was 2003. And Post Tavern now I'm no longer an equity partner there, but I think they've like 6 or 7 on the East Coast and kind of a, well-known, beautiful beach brand. But that was the first time in this area that I was a partner and instrumental in operating and growing the business. And that opportunity helped me start a restaurant, like we talked about, the Spanish wine bar, Raval. And Raval was really, I think, the first time that I was a part of creating something that I had seen somewhere else, right? That eventually kind of became the model for traveling around the world and seeing something beautiful or experiencing something that I realized our community didn't have, and I wanted to share with them.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be able to have it myself. I wanted to be able to go once a week and be like, let's go get, Spanish tapas and beautiful wine. And Spanish wine at the time was, booming in the States, and it was really having its heyday, or really, being acknowledged as great, having great wine. And so, that was the first time I kind of created my own version of something that I had experienced.
Yeah, I want to unpackage that, but I also want to acknowledge and address some of the things that you said and bring it to the surface. The power of, one, going to other restaurant groups who are opening restaurants and learning the process of opening restaurants. The business of opening restaurants and running restaurants, two different things.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're young and passionate and have dreams of opening your restaurant, don't go work for the best restaurant. Go work for the best person at opening restaurants.
Yeah.
And go open restaurants, because you will learn so much, but also work in restaurants, but definitely get a few openings under your belt. Be a part of the managing team, because that is such invaluable skill set you'll pick up. Then also, you're new to town.
Yeah.
If you came in and landed in 2000 and you tried to open a restaurant in 2000, you don't know anybody. Spending 5 years working for people opening restaurants and meeting other passionate restaurant people, now you're building your network.
Yeah.
You can't open a restaurant where you don't have roots laid down.
Yeah, 100%. And listening, something that has occurred to me over and over every time I've done it, and also now that we've been going into other markets, is that far too often people open restaurants for one, right? They're like, I have this great idea and I love this, but they don't listen to the market. They don't go out and determine that there's truly a need. Or they just go out to battle, in a street fight with other talented restaurateurs for every customer there's out there. And that is so damn tough. But when you listen, when you're thoughtful about what a community might need, or a segment of the market that's not being met, that's truly, that maybe people don't know they're interested in, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. So you open a
Revolve.
Revolve.
Yeah.
Thank you. Revolve. Am I saying it right? Sorry.
Revolve.
Revolve.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What were there any struggles?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, we built a concept that was built around Spanish wine, right? And we did it in a very worked with Bill Johnson Architects out of Atlanta, who's just like iconic in restaurant design, and built a beautiful space. But and Charleston culture really is. We have very European tendencies here, like people enjoy the drinking here in a different way, in a way that's different from how I've seen it in the rest of the United States. But it's more of a part of maybe that's the South in general. I don't know. But
European, so the European culture generally drinks to get drunk. Yeah. There's this fascinating book called Drunk, which talks about the evolution of drinking culture since we were monkeys, literally, like eating overripe fruit.
Fermented.
Have you read that book?
No.
It's such a fascinating book. But they talk about like the evolution and how drinking alcohol manifests in different cultures.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong by saying that, white people love to get hammered.
Right. Well, and I just hadn't seen it the way I saw it when I came here from the West Coast to the East Coast. And I guess that's why I likened it to our strong, European roots here and the history here. But I
shouldn't say all, like, so Southern Europe, Mediterranean cultures tend to be more sippy, but they drink all day, where like Northern, cultures are like, it's time to drink now, and we got 5 hours to drink as much as possible.
Go to town. No, it's okay.
I don't want anybody to be offended by my statement.
Well, but what we misunderstood about Spanish, just doing a Spanish wine bar with light tapas, was that the market here wanted more food, and they wanted to be able to transition in order for the business model to really work and for us to make money. And we needed to build out more than just Spanish wine, cocktails, and some small, pinchos essentially. And so we had to tinker. And that was the first time I'd seen that, I had participated in that, like, wow, the numbers are good. Everybody loves this. but we're not feeling the profitability we want to see. So we've got to keep pushing this concept, you know? And so we did the Spanish wine bar in the front room, and then in the back room eventually built more of like a cocktail lounge where there was a DJ at night, and it ended up becoming everybody's favorite place to go dancing. And then when the space opened next door, it was like, well, we should, you know, we could make more food if we rented the spot next door and put a hole in the wall and connected the spaces.
I love that approach to growth. Start where you can and knock down walls.
Yeah.
People get so over their skis. They're like, I need a giant restaurant.
Boy.
That's a lot of empty seats.
Yeah. There's a lot of way to burn money fast. But yeah, so, and then, you know, and so because of that, then it's just like always the next idea, the thing that we saw somewhere else that we wanted to bring back. And that was Neapolitan pizza. And it was a very natural fit to, you know, build a Neapolitan pizza restaurant in Monza next to Reval. And so, and they were connected. And then we suddenly had we did have the size of a business that had the right scale and the right staffing and labor so that it could, you know, meet the requirements for our ROI essentially and how we wanted to operate that business.
Were you using that kitchen for both restaurants?
No, but there were services that were connected, like the grease trap between the two were connected. Like we used different things to, you know, if you'd had to put 2 grease traps in both sides, it would have been very difficult. And so we used as many combined as many resources as it made sense ultimately.
And I think opening a restaurant next door is, if you're going to open a second restaurant, is the best place to open it because you can literally take a step.
Yeah, Danny Meyer taught everybody that, like, right? No, it makes total sense. And at the same time that we were doing that is when the first Taco Boy was built out on Folly Beach.
I am curious. Did you have a partner for Revel?
Yeah, actually, you know, that's probably a through line of my career too, is I've had business partners, some that are silent investors, some that are active participants in the daily operation. And it's been different everywhere. And I think that's been good that, you know, as I learned over my career, to find partners that have the same values. Super important, right?
Did you make this mistake?
Oh my God. Yeah, I keep making it. Are you kidding me? No, I'm kidding.
So what is your process to make sure they have the same values before going into business with them?
Well, I think there's a handful of things, right? Like partnerships are like marriages. And so you want to make sure you have the same values. You want to be able to talk through that. And ultimately, you really want to get a good lawyer involved really in the early part of it for an operating agreement.
I think marriages should probably have lawyers get involved.
Right.
Real ones.
Right. The prenups. Like, and that is exactly what it is. Like I say, any business venture, when you're getting into it with anybody else, it's really a good idea to you want to go in. Everybody gets so excited about the proposition of building something and creating something new. Like the promise is so intoxicating, but the reality of it is the hard things happen and lives are destroyed and relationships are destroyed when you don't take the discipline up front and say, let's talk through every hard thing that we could encounter and let's get 100% clear on whose responsibility it is to do this, what's going to happen when X happens and Z happens. Yeah. And have it documented. And that's really hard to do when you're, you know, getting excited to spend time and create with other people. But it is so essential because those guidelines help inform decisions along the process. They help guide everybody when things get tough, and they always will.
Were you doing this at Revel?
Yeah, we did. But what we learned is we didn't have a great operating agreement. We had like a copy of somebody's operating agreement from a real estate company. And so later down the road, as we continued to like copy that every time we formed a new entity
add a new one.
Yeah. We realized we did find ourselves at one point where we were like, oh, gosh, we have this operating agreement. Doesn't make any sense.
So what does your operating agreement now have that wasn't present back then?
I mean, we have to think, we go through every worst case scenario, right? What happens if a partner dies? What happens if somebody's incapacitated? What happens if
partner's not doing their job?
Right. Yeah. If somebody's an operator, they're not doing their job. What happens if somebody does something nefarious? What to hurt the business or hurt somebody in it? Like, what happens if somebody's just tired and wants to get out? You know,
exit strategy.
Yeah,
and that will happen eventually.
100%. Things like, when do we have to come to the floor and discuss things? You know, so certain thresholds. If I'm the operator, you know, the daily operator for that LLC or that entity, and I'm in charge for the partnership of getting that done. at what threshold do I put my hand up and say, guys, we need to spend, ladies and gentlemen, we need to spend $10,000 or $5,000, and everybody says, sure, do it. But like, what thresholds that needs to happen?
What's crazy? I feel like I was literally in my mind just thinking, like, I want to ask her how much we should budget to get an operating agreement, and like as I was feeling that, like, we just went there. So thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people might say to themselves, I don't have $10,000.
Yeah, no, it's not that much.
But what's it going to cost you if you don't spend that extra $10,000? Especially if you're going to banks and you're raising capital.
Yeah.
Like, you raise $1 million, right?
Yeah.
Raise $10,000 more or $10,000 more dollars. I'm not going to say, if you're raising $1 million, you should have a sponsor. I would hope most people would have a sponsorship agreement, a partnership agreement.
Yeah.
I worry about sponsorship agreements. You worry about partnership agreements. Just get the extra money.
Yeah, 100%. I think that like we've spent anywhere from like $1,500 to $3,500 in that process, and it's and in telling it, and being candid with everybody, like, bring your own lawyer if you want. Like, let's get this thing hammered out. Let's hire, and that is probably one of the most important things, because in that process, you actually get to see somebody's character. You get to see what's important to other people, and you get to see how they react in almost like a pseudo negotiation.
You really find out if your core values align.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that's important. If you don't trust somebody, if you wouldn't bet your own house or your own existence on their ability to make decisions, you shouldn't be going into business together.
What about, so early on, this first partner, was it a financial partner or an operating partner?
No, at the time, I had several partners in each one of those restaurants, and we ultimately had different roles swapping in and out. Sometimes it was, I was never just the money person, but I was generally always the person who got the restaurants open and helped participate in crafting the concept, right,
so
from a creative standpoint.
And you did go to school for creative retail, right?
Yeah, before I got into culinary school, I was in the visual merchandising school before they closed it.
I was curious about that over there.
Yeah,
I was like, she's doing what she went to school for in a sense. Right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I've always loved design. My mom built houses for years, and I used to watch her, draw out. She basically was the architectural designer for every home they built. And so I've got to see design from a very, very early and very hands-on approach. And so I've always loved it, and it still really, fills my cup now in what I do. But but I think ultimately what I've learned in from that time, from what I was doing with all those partners and opening businesses, that's my favorite process. Is opening.
Yeah, and there's a lot of weird questions I ask sometimes, and I'm not trying to expose you or be disrespectful. How did you get the money for the first restaurant?
Well, the first one I was given, the first one, it was kind of like, just being partners, and hey, we're putting this money in and you're doing the sweat equity. Right. So that was
the first.
Yeah. And then similarly on my second one, same. I was the daily operator, and there was Post Tavern, and I was basically, given the opportunity to be an equity partner, because I think they were really smart to know that if you have your skin in the game, then you're going to be approaching it very differently.
I think this is the new business model. I don't know if you're familiar with Uptown Social and what they're doing.
Oh yeah.
But they're so quick to offer partnerships.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can do it alone today with marketing and finance and technology.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe you can do it all, but you won't have the time of the day to do it all, even if you have the skill set to do it all. It's getting so more, like you've been in this industry for how long? Like, how much more complicated is it today than it was 20 years ago?
Oh, easy. I mean, it's, I would say 10 times exponentially harder, but maybe it's just the scale that I'm into now, but it is technology and the consumer, and there's so many things that are different now. And that is the big thing for me, is I've learned from all of those partnerships. I've learned from all of the experiences, from, every mentor, every creative, every business partner that I had, that we all just generally come with certain strengths. And so we can't do it all ourselves. Yeah. And many entrepreneurs, I mean, there's definitely a point in my life where I was building and operating and doing the creative, and I was good enough at each one of those components that I could do it, and I could build a company based on it. But the pitfalls come pretty quickly when you scale and you're wearing that many hats.
Take me to a pitfall. Take me to a struggle.
Well, not being able to focus on not being able to do anything really, really well because you're trying to do everything, right? So, and I wish I could say like there was just like one moment, but I can't say that there was just like one moment where it was like, oh, this is because of that. Maybe there's just tiny moments every single time. But, you know, being able to train and mentor people the way that you want to, like I understand now that is the most important thing my team wants from me is my time. And I spend more time with lawyers and more time with architects and insurance folks and engineers and, you know, all kinds of things. So I now know that by not doing everything yourself, you can really focus and have impact, and especially in the areas that where your strengths are, to elevate, you know, what you're working on.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and so I would say that's, you know, I think I learned that lessons in small bits along the way.
How do you prioritize what to shed first? If you're doing everything and you need to find focus and narrow your focus, you can't just stop doing something.
No, but I think there are definitely things if you're like, I am best at this, I am least best at that. You know, you just shed the thing that you're the least best at, because odds are it takes you the most time. And maybe you're like, for me, I'm not a detail-oriented person.
Amen, sister.
You know? And so like I would have problems with, you know, putting my calendar together or getting, you know, reading emails thoroughly and seeing all that before responding.
Are
and
you dyslexic by any chance?
I have ADD pretty bad. I'm not dyslexic, but I definitely, like, my attention is, you know, limited at best.
Yeah.
And so, I would say the things that you just know are not your strengths are the things that you should shed the quickest. And the things that you can really outsource quickly, like bookkeeping. Right? A lot of times people in our industry get behind in putting their invoices in and paying their bills. And it's not because maybe they don't have the money. It's just maybe they just don't love doing it.
Yeah,
so it stacks up.
What are you not good at? What are you don't like?
Yeah.
And like, or what are you good at, but, oh, you're way better at that than I am.
Yeah.
So well, you do it. And so I can do what I'm the best at, which is, for you, it sounds like the visioning, the planning, the building, the putting the teams together. Yeah. And it sounds like that's your link, because you don't spend a lot of time in the restaurants.
I love to spend time in the restaurants, but it's not, and that's the challenge of growing the way that we are right now is prioritizing being in the restaurants with my teams now. Right. I do, because although my strength is being the visionary and seeing way down the road what we're capable of and inspiring people around me to do it and to be a part of the team and to do it together. I definitely don't get the opportunity to have the one-on-one time that I want with people. But at the same time, it's the feedback from my teams. It's the listening that happens in the restaurant and the conversations that we have that best inform me how to do my job the very best. So it's really, I find myself at this place where I used to do everything, right? And now I really do the bookends, which is the long range planning, the long range, you know, vision of what we're doing and how we're trying to create it, and working with my team, with the senior leadership team, to get it done. So directors of operation and communication and culinary and, you know, and team success and I work with them. And then I use my experiences in the restaurant and listening to the teams and the conversations that I have with the teams to really gauge the results of our work together.
When did you go from a place of telling to listening? When did that shift, the power of listening, really come into the vision for you?
During the pandemic, 100%.
How have you listened differently?
We weren't really listening before at all. We were listening to the customer, and we were listening to our own egos. And we were not really listening to our teams.
What happened what was the shift? What was the tipping point?
I think that the clarifying moment of the pandemic, when we shut the restaurants down, and when I was a part of reopening each one, we weren't shut very long in South Carolina, you know.
Thank you, South Carolina.
No, it's bonkers. And but we, you know, it was the hardest time of my whole career. I didn't know if I was gonna lose everything we'd worked for. And never had it ever been more obvious that the dishwasher and the host and the line cook and the prep cook and the bartender and the server were the most important people in the room. And they had been the whole time, but they were not given the voice. They weren't given the platform, and nor were they really given the credit. And even though we said, we were, I just distinctly remember, I mean, every organization I've ever worked with or worked for, or, partnered with is like, yeah, it's all about the people. Right. But we weren't really doing that. We had such unrealistic expectations about how people were supposed to live their lives and what they were supposed to work for. And our bottom lines grew because of those expectations. And seeing that moment of realizing, like, it didn't really matter on some of those days, like, it didn't matter if the manager couldn't come to work, but it sure shit mattered when the line cooks didn't come to work.
So was it like an awakening? It was like a moment where you're just like, we can do better?
There were weeks and weeks and weeks of really, like, just being in the grinder, and that kind of stress. And I for me was, it's never not there's never a point where I'm like, we're going to quit, right? It's just how do we always get better? How do we learn from this painful moment? And there wasn't a moment where I was like, aha. It just kept revealing itself over and over and over in the probably 16 to 18 months that we were enduring the ever shifting, finish line moving constantly, guidance moving constantly, people's fears leading the day, not knowing what to do in a global pandemic. I mean, it was just, so the idea that towards the end of that, towards, I guess it would probably middle of 2020. So not quite even then, like rebuilding our leadership team with other people who had the same ideas of like, yeah, we can transform the world one restaurant at a time, actually.
Yes. And if you transform, I believe if you transform restaurants, you will transform the world. We're too close to what is life?
Right.
Like food is, I feel like also like food, like life has changed, but like we also eat life, like, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just feel like if there's an industry to change the world, it's the restaurant industry, because it's all connected.
The interconnectedness is it's powerful.
If we change, I think the world's forced to change with us.
I agree.
So that's what I hope I inspire. And you're totally inspiring right now. Like, you're dropping, like if you're not changing people, if you're not influencing people, I don't know what will change and influence people. But when you started listening, what started to change? Speaking of change, growth.
Well, I think ultimately really thinking through like the life cycle of like, why do people come to our industry? And what is our expectation of what we're supposed to offer them when they, show up on the shores and show that they have an interest, or maybe they just, were shipwrecked there from life circumstances, whatever it was, but what is our opportunity and our obligation in saying, here is one of my favorite things about the restaurant industry, which is me, like I'm a college dropout, like I went back a couple times to get some accounting classes to make sure I understood I had financials, but, and I own a company. It's like, it is the great equalizer of you can show up with nothing, just the sheer tenacity and will and drive and a love for this business. And as long as you're willing to stay open and to continue to learn, and you have the, aptitude for risk, you can do anything.
Yeah. And you have to listen to learn.
Yeah.
You have to be open to learn.
Yeah.
But you have to open those channels first.
Yeah.
You have to tell everybody, I'm listening.
Yeah.
And they have to know their safe space for them to tell something so they can be candid with you.
Yeah.
And not worry about their job.
And creating a culture, I think this is when we rebuilt the company in 2020 during the pandemic and brought leaders along who had ideals around pursuing excellence and just never stopping the learning and the listening, right? Like that this was our really kind of, this is what we were set up to do every day. This was our true purpose, was to continue to help develop each other. Through that lens that we could really build an amazing company by saying, here is the space that we're all going to help improve each other.
Yeah.
And with that requires everybody to be open to the feedback and being willing to constantly ask, how can I do that better? How can we do that better? Can I offer you some feedback to hear how you can do that better?
Yeah.
And I love just the simple questions that get these amazing answers every single day from our teams. Like when I have the opportunity to sit down in lineups or walk into a kitchen and help meet who might be new, introduce myself and meet who's new, or high five the team that's there. And when I get to say to somebody, tell me how we could do something better. Tell me with your outside eyes, what we need to improve. Like it gives me chills because frequently it is something we're already working on or we are already aware of. But more importantly, like that moment where somebody says, you know what, 3 of our POS terminals are down and we can't figure it out and it makes things harder. And I have the opportunity to be like, I can fix that, you know, and I can make your job easier. But more importantly, I can show you that just by having the right tools and in the right environment and in a place where you can tell me what you need and know that somebody else isn't going to get in trouble, right? Like I'm not going to go find a general GM and be like, and tell me why you haven't fixed these POS terminals, you know, that this is just a place for us all to get better and better. Like the lift that comes from everyone who's involved in that is my favorite part.
Yeah. I'm pushing deep into the idea of listening right now.
Yeah.
Because I literally just had this author I was in Philadelphia last week. We connected with Christine Miles, the author of What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? The power of, I can't remember the subtitle, but it's like how to connect, solve, sell, and it's powerful.
Yeah.
And we go through like practices on like how to be a better listener, the questions to ask to be a better listener. If you looked at that title and thought to yourself, I'm skipping over this one.
Yeah.
Don't be a knucklehead. Go back and listen to that because it's literally the key to communication is listening, understanding. First seek to understand, then seek to be understood. And if you approach every conversation as a information gatherer, not a teller, you will go so much further. Yeah. It's super powerful. And I want to have her back to do some workshops and stuff because it's super powerful stuff. Okay. I'm loving everything you're giving us. I'm looking at the time. I know you're very busy today. We got 30 minutes left together. So looking at I'm just going to rifle through your timeline. So 2005 Revolve. If I'm saying anything wrong, please correct me.
You got
it. 2006 Folly Beach. 2007 Monza Pizzeria, which was next door. 2009 Closed for Business. Is that actually something that closed, or is that the name of a business?
It's the name of a business.
Okay, just making sure I read that right. 2009 also Taco Boy.
Downtown, yeah.
Which is 5 locations now. 2011 the Royal American. 2013 Park and Grove. 2014 Park Cafe. Is that the same thing? Or
that was the same thing, actually.
Okay.
So I think 2011 was, or 12 was Lily's Hot Kitchen. Yeah.
And then I guess there was Wiki, or is that Wiki Sandbar?
Yeah.
2018. Then 2022 the Bounty Bar.
Yeah.
Where do we focus? So here's what I want to know. Let me know if you think this is a good approach for the rest of our time. What are the economics of the big picture?
Wow.
What do I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned that restaurateurs will have their passion projects that aren't really money generators, but it's whether it's an ego thing or just a hobbyist thing or like maybe they're just really interested in that cuisine, but the community is really interested in it. And then they have their cash cows. Yeah. The ones that are just like, well, I can scale this. This has legs. This can generate tons of money and it will float the things that I like to do. Yeah. Is there anything, does that feel?
100%.
So what are the economics of that?
Well, I think it's interesting because there's a tax perspective there too, right? If you have a passion project that's kind of ekes by or doesn't, and you can kind of easily get in a place where you're like, it's okay because I like it, and it maybe it helps me on my taxes, whatever. But you're absolutely true, and I think there's, those businesses that tend to really cash flow or become, expansion vehicles or whatever, vehicles for growth. They become harder to run and more challenging to do the way that you want with integrity, and it's just. I think you end up finding ways to fill, to make yourself feel, I guess filled up is the right way, is what I was going to say without saying filling your cup too many times today, but finding fulfillment in the work that we do, Can
I take a guess? Are we talking about Taco Bar?
Taco Boy, yeah.
Taco Boy, thank you. So yeah, and I kind of would have identified that as the cash cow. I mean, these concepts have legs. Mm-hmm. They can go, they can travel. They're relatively simple from an operations perspective. Yeah. So you said that as you scale, they get harder to run. Yeah. For you, what were the struggles?
Well, I think there was a lot of important lessons, right? So one is diversification, and I think that's another reason why restaurateurs do what we're doing, which is you want to be able to scale with as much money as you can of your own money right? We've also saw recently in during the pandemic and other downturns, it's like if you've got big, private equity money or big debt bank debt, that is tough when things happen that you can't control. Versus trying to use as much of your own capital to really get that growth done. But you also have to live, right? So for me, there's been a nice way of diversifying, being able to have smaller satellite businesses that help me provide income so that I can also really double down and help grow and not take on as, outside money. And then it's harder because there's just more people.
Yeah.
And people...
You can only handle so many relationships.
Right. And so then the challenge comes, and this is kind of coming back to what we talked about earlier, like what is the long lessons here is like, we're only as good as the team that I build around. I'm only as good as the team that I build around me. And so now I'm in a place where I have to be able to, I've never spent more time interviewing people. I interview every management candidate we have for the whole company. And then we have these very rigorous, interview processes for both any management, beginning MITs or senior level management or senior level leadership, where we want to we're going to take somebody to the grocery store and see if they're going to put the cart away. Like, we really want to know who people are because
you're constantly being interviewed.
Yeah.
The interview process never stops.
Yeah. and ultimately we have to trust people's judgment and who they are, their core, because we are trusting them. I'm trusting them to help influence and lead our teams on many different levels. And so that has been the big lesson is, we took on the regional growth of Taco Boy because we finally had the right team around us who was building talent.
How'd you know you had the right team?
Because when everybody else still couldn't staff their restaurants for 7 days a week, we had more than enough staff, and we had leaders who understood it was, on some level, it was a numbers game, right? You just went out and did everything you could to interview and interact with as many people as possible, and then work really hard to refine the selection process, and then ultimately never stop working on improving the culture so that you could retain people. It was just try to get 1% better every day at these things. And for the first 2 years, we were really bringing people from the outside in to get to rebuild it. But once the 1% improvement of every day really started to take root, we've never had as much internal growth as we're seeing now, and to be able to interview management candidates who are servers or bartenders or cooks who would say to me, like, well, I used to be a manager and I got burnt out at this time or at this place, or this, this was terrible. I swore I never wanted to be in the industry again. And I'm back here just because I moved to town and need money. But I'm so inspired now by the environment. Like, I now want to come back into management. I want to lead. And I think that's the difference, is like, we went from a place of quote unquote managing people to realizing we had the opportunity to lead.
Yes. Empower people.
Yeah.
Transform people. Grow.
Yeah. And so
life.
Exactly. and that flywheel now is spinning. And because of that, it was like, well, now our duty is to grow, to provide opportunity, to be able to provide ownership opportunities, to provide upward, financial mobility for everyone who joins us. And the only way we do that is if we always just say, like, I used to say we used to grow the pie to share the pie. Now I have to grow the quesadilla to share the quesadilla,
Take me to the tipping point of like you said, you hit this point where like the flywheel started going, you started really there was a shift almost in culture.
Yeah.
Take us to the point where you that shift happened, but just paint the picture of what the I guess the culture, i.e., what were you doing? Like, what were the mission, vision, core values, and then what were you doing to echo those things? And how did you make sure people knew who you are and how you did things? What elements did you have?
That didn't really happen from the beginning, honestly. We just refined that again. So we had to go back and do it because we put something on a card. Yeah. But it didn't mean much.
If you're growing, you're also changing.
Yeah.
You're also learning. You're giving yourself access to different perspective. Maybe what you thought before isn't what you think now.
Yeah.
Maybe you've grown and you have a broader horizon, and what matters to you now is different than what mattered to you.
100%.
Then. It's okay to change your core values, your vision, your mission, because it's only natural.
Well, and it was so lofty at the time too, and we weren't really connecting values with behaviors. So we were just saying, like, it's important to be honest.
Yeah.
But really that there was a moment where we sat in a room and the senior leadership team, the director of operations and director of finance, director of culinary, looked at me and my business partner, Jerry, who's been, so important in my career, and looked at me and said, Karalee, show us the new stores. Like, we have grown a team. We are growing people. Now you show us the growth. And it was like, oh, well. Okay, let me get to work.
So what is your vision?
Our mission is to provide positive experiences for people every day.
What is your vision?
Our vision is to transform our community, inspire action, incite fun, and develop individuals.
What are your core values?
Honesty, growth-mindedness, positivity, respect, and genuine hospitality.
I really put you on the spot there. You did great.
Boom.
Yeah. But you should also be able to get to the point where you have this stuff stuck in your head. So you're constantly, when you see people not reflecting your core values or following your vision or following your mission, you can say, hey,
right,
what are our core values? Right. So you're not correcting the person, you're correcting the process.
Yeah.
And they agree to all this before they ever start working for you.
Yeah. David McClaskey was huge at teaching us that. David McClaskey, he actually, I think his organization is called the Business Excellence Institute, but he is incredible. He helped create the Baldrige Award for, I think it was the Reagan administration, when, the Japanese automakers were kicking the American automakers' butts.
Kaizen.
And they sent him to figure out, like, why is it, what were they doing differently? And he created this standard of excellence in American businesses, and then you could put yourself up for these awards to be evaluated, basically, to see how good you are at operating. And Ritz-Carlton has won it. Kodak won it years ago. I think IBM, and there's some of the very best companies in the country have won it. And he teaches restaurateurs every day how to apply those same principles. But he really taught us how to use the values, the mission, and our purpose or our mission, our mission statement to inform how we treat team members and how we treat each other every day.
Yeah, you don't do these things to write them down in a book and walk away and never look at it.
Yeah.
They literally are your North Star.
Yeah.
Everything you do goes through this filter. And it makes people might sound like that sounds horrible, like I would hate it makes your life so much easier because now the decision-making process is easier. If you have to make a decision, you throw it up against your core values, your vision, your mission. Yeah. If it's not that, then the answer is no. Yeah. And it takes so much weight off your shoulders.
It is. And I think, that's the one thing that I've noticed in my career is so many people get elevated into positions of management or leadership without ever being trained on how to do it. And it's really nice to be able to use those tools that mean so much to us, actually, for who we are, as the filter through how all those decisions get made.
You mentioned the name David, what's his last name again?
McClaskey.
Yeah. I want to make sure... and the name of his business, I want to look this up.
Yeah, I think I would want to make sure that we had that correct because I think it might have changed recently. But he just offers these courses that blew my mind, and
this
now
is my research.
I like it, and now we take everybody in our management leadership team takes it, and it's a time commitment, but I think it really changed we made sure we were all speaking the same language, and I think that's what you were saying. Like your culture has to be the lexicon of your mission, purpose, and values has to be in your culture.
And this is why I don't know if you're familiar with Traction or EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, but that's exactly what they're saying is like, listen, like you need to, your business is built on a foundation. So we talk about all the systems and processes in a business, but the foundation itself is also a system. Yeah. And everyone has to learn that system so they use the same language, so they know what you mean when you're saying things. So there's a process to running the business. There's it's
100%.
So it's like, it's great. I like EOS. David McClaskey sounds like he has a process. Whatever the process is, make sure you have a process that your business is built on. Yeah. It's very important. We've covered so much. I'm loving this conversation. I also reinforce something. I say cash flow and people determine growth. Mm-hmm. And I love that you echoed that in your story. And that's also why I love Profit First. Are you familiar with Profit First? Mm-mm. Basically says everything gets paid first and then operational expenses, because whatever's left over after you take a profit, after you do owner's pay, after you do taxes, after you do everything else that you need to do, the money that needs to go someplace, that what's left over determines growth. And like cash, I think it's just a great way to kind of act as a governor for growth. I don't know what else to talk about. We covered so much. well, you know what? You did mention, I'm going to scroll up here to find my notes. 5 locations and counting. It's hard to scale. I think you said it's hard it's hard to do this without losing integrity. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
So get into that a little bit. I'm curious.
Yeah, I was always scared of growing outside of Charleston. And part of it was I feel like I'd watched other brands do it. And what inevitably happened when they put the idea first, or maybe the capital came first, right? Before the human talent came, before the team came, is I watched them dilute their DNA, their top talent. And inevitably, when you wanted to go to one of those brands in another market to experience what you'd experienced, that familiarity, that consistency that you were looking from the first memory of that brand wasn't the same.
Yeah.
Right. And I watched that happen over and over. And obviously people do it for different reasons. Like some people are like, let's scale this and put it on the market. And we're looking for that liquidity moment or whatever it is, like
you get your EBITDA hunters out there.
Yeah.
And they're like, ooh, they get grubby. They're like,
yeah.
let me get my fingers all over your business. Look how we can take it. Because they're looking to cash in and cash out.
Totally. And so that always felt never felt good to me. Especially it was like, hey, here's your life's work. And sure, I'm sure there's a moment where you're like, oh, if there's enough money, you'd be like, yeah, take it, but that just never felt good to me that like, hey, well, let's just grow this in a way that to be out looking to sell it. Or, I don't know, I've never felt good about that. I've always felt better about saying, hey, we're trying to develop an institution for our community. And we know our community really well. And we know how to create positive impact here. We know what our community needs and how to fill the gaps. And sometimes that's easier as a private partner than it is as a public partner, right? To rely on public agencies to do that work. And so I really felt passionate about the fact that we needed to stay put. And I loved how Zingerman's did that in Ann Arbor, right? Like, $80+ million company. And they were like, we're not on the road. And I am a divorced mom of 6-year-old. Like I never wanted to be like on the road. I didn't think I ever wanted to be on the road. And then when we had that moment where the team said to me, like, and people had been saying for years that we should take Taco Boy on the road. And I just was like, oh, I don't know. I like it here. I like the way we've got it, and really wanted the Zingerman's model. But then it was learning from my team.
That if anybody's not familiar with the Zingerman's model, I did have Ari on the show. So just go search Restaurant Unstoppable, Ari Weinswag. But in simplicity, it's taking that idea of creating something and creating systems and processes and culture so you can scale out, but instead of scaling out, scale in. Scale and vertically integrate like there's nobody's business.
Yep. And so we've kind of what we've decided is we're going to do a little of both, and we're going to find communities that we can hire senior leadership in. So now as we've grown, we have a director of communications who lives in Asheville. And she is a part of that community and helps us listen and be a part of that community. And we're hiring other members of senior leadership as we grow to live in the communities that we're growing in, so that we're not extractive. And I think ultimately, instead of feeling like this is what proposition of spreading our talent out from Charleston, the paradigm has shifted where it's like, let's find the best people who have the same values that we do, who want to strive for excellence every day and help develop each other and develop the people around us. And let's gather instead. Let's gather a tribe.
Okay.
Yeah, gather a tribe around us, right? And not feel like we have to satellite people out, but let's not send somebody out to go live in another community. Let's find the people there who are our people and help us understand how we can be, the best citizens. And people always ask me like, well, where do you live now? I'm like, I just live where my son and I are. We have this big van, this mobile office that we recently
I'm so
delivered.
jealous of that thing.
I think it's so
I need to ask you, because that is my dream. What you have in your driveway
we
right
call
now,
it the Taco Boss. Yeah,
I just want to live in a van and just like be able to post up and let the story happen and not rush away from it. So
and that was a bit, that was pretty strategic and for a handful of reasons. And one was, again, to not follow this model where it was like, oh, well, corporate or headquarters, Taco Boy headquarters or whatever is in Charleston, South Carolina. It was like, no, our leadership, our headquarters is where we are, right? Which means I wanted people to know that when the van was there, parked in the parking lot, that headquarters was there with them. And that it was really, headquarters was always there with them.
Can I see your
leadership.
van before I go?
Yeah, for sure.
Are you driving away in it right now?
No, I'm not. We're taking it tomorrow night. We'll take it tomorrow night. But it was also twofold, because I mentioned my young son. I needed a way to make sure that he could have the best experience being on the road with me and the other caregivers who come and parts of our team to help make this all happen. And so just the simple thing of being able to say, hey, there's a couple workstations in here and there's also a lie flat seat that turns into a bed that he can be seat belted in at night. So he gets to stay on his schedule no matter where we are. And in the mornings when we drive between cities, he gets to do his schoolwork the same way he would if he was home in school. And so a big part of that was making sure for me that I could feel really good about leading the way I want to lead and being the mother I want to be as well.
I want an unstoppable mobile so bad. And I already know it. It already has a name.
I love it.
But
what about the license plate? You
I already have an unstoppable license plate. It's already on my current car. I just gotta switch it over.
I love it.
I'm really enjoying this conversation, and we usually wrap up with, where's your business now? I think we did that pretty well.
Yeah.
And what's the change you want to see in the world? And I kind of feel like you just did that. You shared and I am 100% on board with you. We share a lot of the same sentiment. We talked earlier in today's conversation about PF Chang's and these big corporate organizations, and I think that we can learn a lot from those, but also I think what we need to do is find a balance. And I think that we can have tons of PF Chains and McDonald's and name the biggest corporations, Subways, whatever they are. We can take that. We can all operate at that level, but we can scale down and operate regionally like that.
Yeah.
And I think we can and that's kind of how I've evolved over time. I used to think that the corporations and franchises were the enemy, they're evil. Yeah. I do think we can find a better balance still to this day. And I think that we find that balance by taking their practices and operating at that level. And we have access to the technology today to do it. Every restaurant has the access to the technology to be that organized. Yeah. And with that organization, we can bring that focus in and just make an impact locally and have micro chains.
Yeah.
And I think that's the future.
And I think you're seeing that right now. You're seeing great regional operators getting plucked up to do some cool stuff. Yeah. And I do think you're right that it feels like that feels a lot more interesting even from a consumer perspective.
It doesn't need to be hundreds of locations. You can still be a millionaire with 20 restaurants. You can do pretty good for yourself and create lots of opportunity for others.
100%. Yeah.
I've really enjoyed this conversation. We have 10 minutes to bust out a speed round. So we're going to take one more quick break to thank our sponsor, and we'll be right back. We are back, and the first question I have for you is, what is your it factor, a habit, a trait, a characteristic you believe most contributes to your success?
Vision. I really.
What is your biggest weakness?
I'm all or nothing.
What is one question you ask or thing you look for when you're growing your team?
Oof, this is hard. There's so many things. I think integrity.
What is your biggest challenge today?
Surrounding myself with unicorns.
Ooh. How are you overcoming it?
Shaking every tree.
Share one code of conduct or behavior you teach your team, a core value, a way to be.
Growth-mindedness.
What is one uncommon standard of service you teach your team? Something that's common within the four walls of your restaurant to go above and beyond guest expectation, but not common throughout the industry.
Every person is a guest, right? Every person you encounter is a guest. So your team member, your produce truck driver, that we treat each other first how we expect to treat our guests.
And what is one book that's a must read to make us a better person or restaurant owner?
I think with my brain right now, as fuzzy as it is, it's The Heart of Business by Hubert Joly.
And what was the biggest takeaway from that book?
Really how to transform businesses after their first, when they're in their adolescence.
Yeah. There's this theory out there right now that the mind literally, or the heart actually has a mind in it, like a bundle of neurons or nerves that act like a heart. There's somebody out there I need to talk to. Do you know that person? Does it get into that stuff? Like energy?
No, this was about,
math?
turning around Best Buy,
Okay.
But it's really more just, I think like a lot of people, it was really influential to me because I did transform my company when it was in its adolescence, 14, 15 years old.
You also mentioned Ari Weinswag. I want to give him a little nod as a past guest, and I love what they're doing over there at Zing Train. If you're interested in learning more about what we discussed, The Lapsed Anarchist Approach 2, and there's like 5 books, I think, in the series. But the first one is The Lapsed Anarchist Approach to Building a Great Business. Then the next one is Becoming a Better Leader, and then Knowing Oneself is the other one, and I can't remember but all those series, like the cool thing about those books is you can pick them up, and every chapter is written like an essay. Yeah, they stand alone. So he was a huge inspiration to me when I got started. He was one of my dream guests. So, all right. What piece of technology have you recently adopted within the 4 walls of your business that's had a huge impact on communication, efficiency, profitability, anything along those lines?
This is going to sound crazy because it might sound really simple, but just streamlining. All of us are on Microsoft To Do. My team's going to laugh when they hear that too.
No, it's a great tool. I mean, whether it's that or Google or like one of those cloud-based options that lets communication and documents live and be accessed.
Yeah, this is just task management. This is just like how we help each other manage each other's, where we intersect. Like, I don't know. I'm such a task-oriented person. That's probably my perspective only,
I'm going to pause real quick. Brian, at some point, do you think you can stand over there and take a shot? Because I think with all the cameras, it would be pretty... Yeah. That'd be awesome. Sorry, I'm all over the place right now.
I'm with you.
All right, you ready?
Yep.
This is the last question. Mm-hmm. It's a doozy.
Okay.
If you got the news, you'd be leaving this world tomorrow. All the memories of you, your work, and your restaurants would be lost with your departure. With the exception of 3 pieces of wisdom you could leave behind for the good of humanity and for your legacy, what would those 3 pieces of wisdom be?
We're better together.
1.
Clear as kind.
2.
And you become what you believe.
3. Karalee, I've loved today's conversation.
Me too.
I know you're extremely busy, and I can't say thank you enough for making the time to let me come share your story, welcome me into your home to make this happen. There was just so much value in today's conversation.
I loved it.
Oh, thank you so much. And we wrap up every chat by calling somebody out. I'm trying to remove myself from the process of who determines or who we make an example of.
Yeah.
Success recognizes success. Who do you respect and admire? Somebody, if they were a guest on the show, you'd be like, get this person.
I don't know if she's been on the show, but Lauren Bailey of Upward Projects has been somebody I call when I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do now?
Is she in Charleston?
No, she's based out of Arizona.
Ooh,
yeah. Postino is their Postino Wine Cafe is their rollout currently. Beautiful brand, but they're wonderful people and inspirational to me in the way that they're growing and investing in their people, and it's beautiful.
And what city is that?
I think they're in Phoenix.
Phoenix, look out! I'm coming your way. I would love to connect with you, Lauren. And that was Lauren Bailey, right?
Yeah.
And how can we connect with you if we're just like, holy moly? Who is this lady? I need to know more. We want to follow you. Maybe we want to come work for you. What's the best way to connect?
There's a couple ways. I think info@allgoodindustries.com is one email address. I think info@tacoboy.net's another one. I'm on social media. I'm on the socials at Karalee Fallert on Instagram, and I think Karalee Nielsen Fallert on Facebook.
Karalee Fallert, thank you again so much for taking the time to be a guest. There is no questioning. You are unstoppable.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so we just wrapped up here at Karalee Fallert's home. Thank you, Karalee, for welcoming us into your home. We had an amazing conversation. Like, holy cow, this lady blew this episode out of the park. So many great lessons on just surrounding yourself with amazing people. It's almost hard for me to think of where to start with all the things that she mentioned today, but her evolution as a restaurateur, finding partners. She opened a restaurant in Utah when she was 19 years old. It was a huge learning experience for her. She realized she needed to learn more about the systems and the processes of running an industry. So she went to work for P.F. Chang's, got the systems, the processes, the procedures, the importance of culture. She took those lessons with her to Charleston, where she thought maybe she might actually be done with the industry, but then she got sucked back in working front of house as a server. Eventually they're like, we need to partner with you. I don't know if she partnered with those people, maybe, but she got pulled back in. She ended up opening a restaurant not there long after, opening restaurants with these partners. And then in 2005, she opened her second restaurant, Raleigh. I think I'm saying that right. Regardless, it's closed now, but that was her first Charleston restaurant, and she has opened, I want to say, close to 8 different concepts since then. One concept, Taco Boy, has 5 locations. We talked about her evolution of realizing she needs to surround herself with amazing people, the importance of partnerships, and here is a big part of today's conversation. She realized that she needs to listen and open herself up to the people she surrounds herself to give them opportunity to find solutions and be a part of the conversation. We also talked about the importance of scaling slow and letting people, developing people, and cash flow, using your own money to scale and not getting in trouble financially. Awesome stuff. We also just talked about in general the importance of growth. Actually, her opening line, her opening quote was, "Life is growth," or maybe "growth is life," something like that. But it's so true. If you think about life, from a single cell organism to where we are today with the amount of biodiversity there is, like, life is constantly evolving. It's constantly growing and adapting to its current environment, and that we are life. We have so much in common with that single cell organism to this day, with how we act and how we engage our universe and our surroundings. We have to constantly grow. We have to constantly evolve and adapt to our surroundings and coexist with other living creatures, and to create an ecosystem, a healthy business ecosystem. There's so many parallels in this stuff. We got into that. It was a really amazing conversation, and I just can't say thank you enough, Karalee. This is good stuff.